Oh gosh. We kind of we didn't do the definitions actually. We kind of like let it up to the subjects to kind of define what an indie game is, and we kind of let the community point us to the games that they thought we should focus on. We looked at a whole bunch of games out there, and these guys just had really intriguing stories and fantastic games to boot. But I think kind of like the best definition of indie, because you kind of asked that question to every one of the interview subjects, and for the most part, everyone seems to be kind of over the definition of it. It's not like the definition of it seems to kind of not have much bearing on what they're doing. But when forced to define it, I think Edmund kind of said it best, where it's just you creating what you want to create with no outside influence. And so it's not really a matter of budget. It's not really a matter of distribution. It's just a matter of influence. And if you have the influence that you want to have on your game, then for all intents and purposes, and there's a huge gray area, like total gray area, but you're indie.
Well, we initially did a piece on Alakaloka, the creator of Aquaria, a couple years ago, and that piece that we did on him and about his big win at the IGF was what sort of spearheaded all of this. And through meeting him, we met other developers, and then we went down to GDC and connected with even more people, and that's sort of how we got the ball rolling. And it was just really through meeting people, talking to journalists, talking and looking online, and finding out where people were in development and what their games were saying and how they expressed about their games. And in the end, we ended up shooting with about 20 developers, but the film focuses on four developers, but 3 games. And that happened that was pretty organic, because we ended up making film that follows the journey of making like a part of the journey of making Fez and the majority of the journey of making Super Meat Boy, and timing just worked out in a great way that we were able to capture that in real time. And that's what makes the film really special, is to be able to be part of that journey. The other sort of story that we included that sort of has this wonderful way of sort of tying everything together is the story of Braid by Jonathan Blow. And his story just sort of dovetailed really well into these other 2 stories, and that's how it all ended up coming together.
Yeah,
it's just part of the process.
Yeah, completely. Like in terms of like finding interview subjects and everything, that was all extremely organic. Where we did tons of research and we kind of knew people that we thought we'd want to talk to, but a lot of it was also you talk to one person and they're like, oh well, you should definitely talk to these guys because they have a great story and their game's fantastic. You should go check them out. And everybody was so insanely open, and just like really willing to share.
Yeah, there's some really early people that really helped us with the research for sure, and helped. I think that there's lots of, like, I think the journey within a big company would be interesting as well. It just so happened that wasn't where we were and who we met and what we were intrigued by initially.
There were some like early talks when we first bouncing around ideas, because you bounce around tons of ideas. Like we were thinking of, wouldn't it be neat to kind of get that perspective and kind of, just show the differences between the 2 worlds. But the more we investigated, the more we talked to these guys, it just didn't really fit, because I think there's a temptation to kind of make it an us versus them type of story, like little indie guys versus AAA. But in reality, that's not really the case, because you talk to these guys about AAA studios and the games and what those guys are doing. And independent guys, they love AAA games. Like they played them all their lives, and they still play them now. And of course, they have their qualms with them, but everybody does. But they don't see it as like we're doing the thing that they're not. They just see it as we're doing our thing.
Yeah.
And they don't happen to be doing it, but we would be doing it regardless, whether or not they were doing it. And so it kind of became less and less relevant to the stories that we were telling. I think there's a story to tell about that stuff, but it's just not what we ended up talking about in the movie.
Is kind of similar, at least in the way that we took. Like Edmund put out the Meat Boy thing a few years before he even thought of making a sequel or a remaking of that for Xbox. But like we put out a lot of content and we got a lot of feedback as we were making the film in the same way that an indie developer would have an open process.
Yeah.
And share as they create their games.
Yeah.
So,
like we took a lot of cues from indie game guys in how we funded this project and how we were developing this project, and we were really open from day one kind of as to what we wanted to make and how we were making it. And we put out we have now I think around 88 minutes of content out there, stuff that isn't the movie, but it shows the tone of the movie or kind of what we were going through. And this is not a normal way to make a movie at all. It's kind of more of an indie game version of a movie because we would put out these things which, you know, you could kind of say are kind of a little bit analogous to a build of a game. And we kind of like show the flavor of the video, and people would give feedback to that. And it did kind of create this feedback loop where it was a very positive feedback loop, and we didn't end up tweaking much. It was more like a loop of validation, which was great. But yeah, there's so many parallels between like us making this film and those guys making their games, because with those guys making their games, they're one or two people, you know, working a long time by themselves on very accessible technology with just them, their ideas, and hard work. And then they put this thing that they made out in the world. And we're two people that basically just took this very accessible technology, went out, did it ourselves, and sat in front of our computer, you know, for 7 months editing it, and now we're putting it out to the world. It's like there's so many parallels. We actually, now it comes to the point where we use the movie, quotes from the movie. We'll just repeat quotes back and forth to actually tell each other how we feel, and we're using it like in a very sincere way. Like the sentiments are all the same, because it feels like we're going through exactly what those guys went through. You know, Super Meat Boy had the crunch for the Xbox launch, and we had the crunch for the festival deadline, and it seemed like everything was on the line at all times. And
still does.
Yeah, it still does. Yeah. And just you become defined, they became defined by their games, and it came to kind of just kind of touch and flavor and color everything they did.
It's the same thing
it's
for
the same
us.
for us. Like, we live and breathe this movie now. You know, we didn't think we would 18 months ago,
No.
but now it's just, it defines every waking moment.
It's interesting. There is a sort of a culture online of, in some cases, of just being negative for the sake of being negative, and we do get into that in the film, and that's sort of part of the discussion of the film. And so we know rationally that, you know, when people say shitty things about our trailers and stuff, that, you know, that's their opinion, and there's lots of people that like what we're doing as well. So
Yeah.
Rationally, but irrationally, it's awful. It's awful to see people comment and say shitty things about what you're doing. It doesn't feel great, but you know it's wrong to feel bad about it, because there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like what you do. Because
it's never, like, the stuff that stings the most is never, like, well thought out rational arguments as to why they disagree with the video that you just put out. It's, you know, usually like, this fucking sucks type of thing. Like, it's usually that stuff, and, you know, you kind of, you can't help but be affected by it, but you try and not let it guide what you're doing.
It's interesting,
You know?
and this is a lot about what's in the film. It's about how what it's like as a digital creator right now to create and put stuff online, and what that feedback loop is like, and what that journey is like. And so, like, again, we're able to sort of reference what's happening in the film and what these guys go through to sort of feel comfort in what we're going through. And I do think a lot of people experience that idea of sharing yourself online and then getting great and then terrible feedback about it. And how does that feel? I assume a lot of people feel that.
Yeah, and you know, like, we've been really lucky with this film. Like a lot of people love it, or like I've said really nice things and seem to like where we're going with it.
But you remember the negative comments.
Totally. Yeah, you totally do. Like, it's been 99.9% positive, but that 0.1%
asshole.
Yeah, and you remember that. You remember their name. You remember what they said. Yeah. But you deal with it.